All right, so we're going to go back to talking about, we're still in phase one of our PPM methodology. We're in TD admin, and phase one and two is all taking place in portfolio planning over here. And phase three primarily is taking place in projects and workspaces. In portfolio planning, again, this project request sections is that great visual for phase one being for requests, phase two being request review, and phase three being the active projects for your project lifecycle. What we started talking about yesterday after we created the project category project request service was the first thing that the requester is faced when they click on the submit a request button is this general form with the custom attributes, which are just custom fields. Anytime you hear the word attribute or see it, just think of a field, a custom field that you can create. And the settings are just automatically part of this too. You don't have to worry about the settings here. So one and two is what we're talking about. The general part is the request form. So that's this request form over here, the general one that we started to create, right? And so part of your homework, and again, it was less than 24 hours ago, is to start the design of your form and capture the fields that you want your requester to be filling out. So you're going to be doing a little bit of a dance here from a design and a preview perspective. You're going to manipulate your fields, and then you're going to be looking at them. And this is the preview is what the requester will see. And I got to configure it a little bit. So the account department is a mandatory field, as we mentioned, as is the priority, as is the project name. The caveat, though, is that the priority can be hidden from the requester. Right now, if I don't hide it and I save our project request form and I preview it, this is what the requester sees. Account department, they have to select from it, from the existing listing of accounts departments. They'd have to select a priority, low, medium, high, and emergency. It's already built in. And then they have to enter the name of the project. You may want to hide the priority. It still stays on the request form, just the requester doesn't see it. So you can do three things here. You could leave it as is and let them select it. Problem with that we talked about is that requesters think everything is a high priority or emergency. So that's one option, leave it, let them select. The other is to hide it. If I hide it, now, oh, I need to provide a, all right. Now if I hide it, then the requester can't see it now. And it auto defaults a medium priority that I can change if I'm part of the request review people. So those are the two options from a priority perspective. Any thoughts on, do you want it hidden or do you want to expose it to your requesters and let them select?
Hide it.
Okay, good. I'll leave it hidden. And you can see you can move these fields up and down, and probably the name you want up at the top. So I'm just going to move that up, and I could do a drag and drop, right? But these three are mandatory fields on every project request. And again, this account department could default to the default account department on the sponsor or the requester. It'll default to the sponsor if the sponsor is part of this form and the sponsor is filled out and has a defaulted account department on their user record, or if the sponsor is not on it, like it's not on this one, then it would default to the requester's account department. So these other out-of-the-box fields in the right navigation are here for your using if you want to use them. So again, if you want a project description, which I would recommend, project requirements, which I would probably recommend, you can easily add those, and then you can raise them up or down. Again, you can make them editable and required, hidden, read only. These two I would probably make editable. You can have a current start and end date on here. My recommendation is if you leveraged these, that you would force them to put in an end date justification, right? So I'll add these in here. Current
Honestly,
start date, current end date. Oh,
honestly, I
go
think
ahead.
no, I said I think honestly we'd probably just add them all if we're going to do it initially in the first phase of this. So we'd probably just add everything, and then we'd probably walk through and put in the information, and then uh, probably narrow it down later on if we decide to push it out to let them put that information in there. Does that make sense? Because we're going to probably fill this out anyway.
I was going to ask about the editing of these as well. And also the question mark next to it, I know that kind of gives like a little, is that the brief description of what we're looking for? And we can edit that as well? Or is that out of the box and it's not editable? Because for sponsor names, people might not know. You know what I mean?
Right. So on the fields that we've supplied, the help is here. You can provide custom help text here if you wanted to.
Okay, perfect.
You can also expose the help text automatically, so that it shows right away. Okay. What I mean by that is, let me save this for now and just show you the difference. So if I go to preview, this is what it looks like so far. Mm-hmm. in this order. Mm-hmm. and you may want to move things up and down. But on the settings in here, you could initially expand all help. And if I do that and save it, now you'll see what happens. Back in my preview, all of the help will auto populate.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because that'll help. Also, are these titles, they're editable as well, because like for the projected start date and end date, I think I mean for the current start date and end date, I think saying projected, what it would be like what they want it to be started at and finished at, and then that would be not negotiable, but discussed once we kick off the first discussions with them. I don't know if Jeff and James are. If that's what they would want. I'm just throwing it out there to see if we could actually do it. Yeah, that was easy.
Yeah, and I sort of agree. And just like James said, we, to include all the fields. And then as we're helping to intake these projects, and that we'll be filling them out probably within IT jointly with the user.
Absolutely. It's good to get their input in the beginning too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And then we can kind of feel how these are working. Yeah.
I would probably, if you're going to leverage the sponsor, you probably want that above. You might want to move these things around a little bit. And again, you guys can play with this. I'll just probably start and end date you want above. But you can play with this and look at it. I do want to show you how to, and you may not want to use the classification. This is that maintenance operations and projects. You may want to come up with your own custom field name here. So I'm just going to move that one back over there. But what I would recommend is you can create additional fields. So those are the ones that were out of the box that were sitting over here in the right. You can create new fields here by clicking on this plus button. And I would call this projected end date reasoning or something like that, or justification, right? And this would probably be either a single line text box or text area. I'll do the single line for now. And I will do integer. I'll save. And I want to move that one up to right after right here, right? So they can fill in the start date and end date, and then you're forcing them. Let me see the preview on that one. That box doesn't look like how I wanted it. Oh yeah, there. So you're forcing them to say, well, I need this by the start of the semester, or else we won't be able to deliver this class, right? Or we'll lose funding if we don't start this by January 1, whatever it might be. So that's how you add custom fields. And let me just show you the different types of fields here, right? So you can have a checkbox list, color drop down, red, yellow, green, a date field, date and time field, drop down, radio button, horizontal, vertical, multi-select where you make the choices, person lookup, a text box single line, text area multiple line, and a yes no drop down. So you can create the name of the field type, the help text on the field, just like these other ones on here, and to capture that information that you need up front on this general project request form. So let's take a quick look. This is what it looks like now. And if this starts to meet, a majority of your needs, you're pretty good to go. We already have this form attached to your service. So you can certainly come back and edit it at any time. And anytime you edit it, it's already embedded in that service. So you don't have to do anything additional. You just edit the form and it flows back to your, if you recall from yesterday, in the client portal, in your service catalog, in your service. And now that I say it, I'm thinking, wait, maybe we didn't attach it in here. I just want to make sure. It is, no, we didn't. Yeah. So now we can attach it in here. And now that form that we designed, we started designing it yesterday and then just did it right now, is embedded in this service, right? So anytime you come and edit the form back here in portfolio planning, I got to add a custom field, I got to tweak something or change it. All you got to do is do it here one time, and you don't have to go back into the service and add it again. It just flows back and forth. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So custom fields right here, added in here. Excuse me. Determine the visibility of it, right? So determine if it should be editable and required, read only, hidden, and then you're good to go. So certainly over time, sometimes you're going to adjust your form based on feedback that you get, and it's easily done here, and you only have to do it kind of once, and it, like I said, it flows back to your service. So that is, yep.
Mark, question. Okay, so this intake form, does it continue with the life of the project?
Yes, because what's happening is it is capturing, oh, I apologize. I just bounced out of your admin area. What's happening is if I could draw a line, this request form is equivalent to the general and the custom attributes here, and it flows through all three phases.
I see.
So any data captured on that request form is part of your project for the life cycle. Good question.
Okay. Okay. So can you attach documents to it, or is that?
That's right. That's right. Yep, that's right here. Files.
Okay. All right. And can you embed HTML links? Like, as I'm. I'm guessing that you can.
Um, I would think you'd be able to do that in like a text line or text area, embed that, and then that
Oh,
if we go back, if we were to go back into your form, and somebody put in HTML link in the description, they'd be able to click on that and it'd take you to that where that link was populated from.
oh, okay. Okay. All right. Thank you.
On the project record itself, there is a links for, and I'll talk about the typical usage for it, but there's a link area uh,
Oh,
that can be used as well.
okay. All right.
So one of your pieces of homework is to design your request form. If what you just designed meets many of your needs out of the gate, your request form design is done, right? And so we got these two taken care of here. As I mentioned yesterday, when we looked at that request that James had submitted, right, and we saw those red circles, and we had to kind of do that tap dance back and forth of clicking on that section, marking it complete, clicking on it, marking it complete. The reason that those items had red circles was that's what we set as a out of the box essentially. But it's these items that are marked to true in this column here that are going to expose themselves to the requester to fill out additional information if you desire to turn it on. So I'm going to go down through these sections and talk through what they are and tell you what the typical setting is, either true or false. And then you guys can determine if you want those on or not on. So just from a general conceptual idea, if they are turned on, let me start over. What some people do is build out their request form to house a lot of fields or attributes on it, and they collect a lot of data there. Others turn a lot of these on to true to collect more data here. Some people keep it minimal and have a small request form and set a lot of these to false just because they want the requester not to have to fill out quite as much. So just depending on your strategy. But I'll walk through several of these sections to see. Now, I mentioned our scoring component. We do have a scoring metric, and we'll actually, I think we'll be going over that on Thursday. But it leverages number 3, number 6, and number 12. At a high level, these are the organizational goals, high-level organizational goals that this potential project request could be meeting. It then looks at high-level organizational risks that this project, if it doesn't meet, could be exposed to. And then other, what we call criteria or weighted criteria here. So the combination of those three, if you follow our math, could potentially kick out a maximum score of 100, right? And we'll go over the specific math embedded behind all three of those. At a high level, they're leveraging these things over here, the goals, that need to be built out, the organizational risks that need to be built out, and the scorecard criteria that needs to be built out. And then if you have those things built out and you set them to true in this column, you are allowing the requester to fill those out themselves, which may or may not be a good thing, right? If you have experienced project requesters, which it sounds like you probably don't, but if you did and they were trustworthy, then filling out those scoring components might be okay. If you have some folks that are overly optimistic and realize they're filling stuff out that contributes to a scoring methodology, they could game the system. So with that said, oftentimes I would say the majority of the time, customers set line 3, 6, and 12 to false in the for requests column. But if they're going to use it, they set it to true in the for reviews and for projects, right? They don't want the requesters to fill it out, but they want it to be filled out during their review process. So that would be setting it false, true, true. There, false, true, true there. And down here on scorecard, false, true, true there. What are your thoughts so far? Granted, we haven't gone into any of the math yet, but just from a procedural perspective. So I'm just going to show you, we can always toggle this back on if we needed to at any time. And we'll show you on Thursday what this is actually doing. So for now, just based on our initial conversations, I think this is probably pretty standard on how you want to do this one. And then scorecard is already false, true, true. All right. The next two items I'm going to talk about are systems affected and related processes. And by the way, I will send you a KB article about project request sections that will go over what each of these means. So if you're like, oh, I'm drinking from the fire hose today on all of this, you can read through this one by one. But these two items here are pretty similar, so I'm going to go over them together. If you were to build these out, right now they're set to true, which means that the requester would be able to select from a drop down on systems affected and do their best guesstimate on if that system is affected. And the same with a related process because it is set to true. Well, what is a system affected? Let's go over here and see that we don't have any. We have to build it out. So I'm just gonna title these tests so you guys know it's a test, and I'm gonna say like an HR system, like PeopleSoft, right? And I'm going to build out another test one, and I'm gonna call this one student info system. And I am going to do another one, and I'm going to call this one just an IT system. All right, so now these three are a drop down that somebody can select from and say, my project request is going to impact this system or need to be integrated into this system. Same thing with processes. I have to build them out first, so let's build out a couple tests here. And so test academic services. Let me build out a new employee onboarding process. Let me build out one more, and we'll call it a new student. So again, I have to build out these processes. I got to think through all the potential processes that projects could impact, so that if these sections are turned on, 4 and 5 in here, those three systems that I just populated could be selected from. Same thing with these processes could be selected from because they're marked to true. Once again, your requesters might not completely understand all the systems that could be affected by a project that they want. Tell me if this has ever happened to you. You have a faculty member go to an educational conference and they run into a peer of theirs who told them that they just bought a $5,000 piece of software that solved all their academic issues. So that staff member comes back and says, I happen to have $5,000. I want to buy this piece of software and I want to get this implemented. And so they come to the IT people way down the line and say, hey, I'm just about ready to pull the trigger buying this piece of software. It's only going to be $5,000, but I need you guys to help slapping it in. And the IT people go, throw their arms up in the air and is like, do you know how many systems that's going to have to integrate into? And that $5,000 project is now $50,000, and it's going to take 10 of us. And by the way, we've never integrated that type of software into our systems.
I have played that song
Yeah.
so many times.
I've been there. I've done that. So on both ends of the spectrum. And when I was at Madison College, this happened to us all the time. And unfortunately, there were plenty of times where they had already purchased the software, right?
Exactly.
They didn't tell you about it until they got the box in and they came knocking on your door, help, and then you're like, oh, here we go. And now we have to spend, countless hours integrating something that we didn't even have a chance to vet. So this has given you an opportunity to build your systems that could potentially be affected or your processes and allow you to do a good job, because one of the things in your review processes could be reviewing these things so that you can talk to management about, hey, red flag over here. It's going to impact integration with these systems that we have. And this is much bigger than a bread box. This is starting to grow. Because we've all lived that nightmare where somebody thought a $5,000 or $10,000 integration was a piece of cake, and it ended up being a year-long process that you had to embed into your current systems, and the integrations were a nightmare, right?
Right. Yep. Yeah. And
so go ahead.
I can see. Well, as I can see, yeah, for the request, and this is kind of talking to James and Jonathan also. We may want to keep it simple, just like it's phased out here, the requests, the reviews, and then the projects, and that we mirror what we would think at some point in the future that the client would be doing or possibly doing, and that we still follow the phase of inputting the project and then having go to a review phase, just like it's laid out here. Because I can see with us doing the initial part of this, you could put a lot of that review stuff within the initial request, but it'd probably be good for us just to keep them separated.
Well, I was just going to say, no, I agree with that, because what you said, when we're going to be there from the beginning, if we're going to go the ticket route, it's going to kind of roll right into a request, and it's best to keep it simple there. And then once we go in for review, then you can talk about the systems affected and things like that. Yeah, so it's kind of like you want to get the high level on the request, and then once you have the high level and everyone understands what we're trying to accomplish, then you can start going into, okay, how's this going to affect this? What are our timelines and things like that? So right. No, I agree with what you just said. That's okay. Probably best for us.
Yeah, and then hopefully as we exercise this, and hopefully that our request gets moved out to the end user at some point, maybe.
Right. So the more people get used to this process, the better. The more we can put in, that will make it easier for us to just get the ball rolling.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think we're just thinking of transitioning, right? So initially we'll hold their hand, and then once they get used to it and we can define these better, especially in systems. I mean, I'm trying to think, it's like, geez, that could be a lot of different things, right? You won't really know what systems you're affecting until you're actually looking at the project.
Right.
And for us to come up with every system and imaginable right now, I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, honestly, we just don't want to create more work for ourselves at the beginning. So if we can just kind of walk them through it in the beginning and stay there step by step with them, it'll create less work for us as we move forward, I think.
So from a design perspective, it sounds like you guys are going to be walking them through you guys are going to be doing this part out of the gate.
Correct.
Does that sound
correct?
Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
At least initially.
And that we should think about it in terms of the client filling it out, even though we are the ones doing it. We should think about them.
Yeah, that's my thinking too. And that way, down the road, after we get this built out, and they're already used to, well, they're not used to us. It shouldn't be too unfamiliar, since we'll be walking through it and we'll be discussing those things, and then we can just make the modifications as we go.
Yep. Okay.
At least that's my thinking.
Yeah. Same here.
Yep, I agree.
So if you want to keep this minimal for your requesters down the road, I'll give you my recommendations here. I would turn this to false. I would turn this to false, but I would keep it true here. I'd go false, true, true. Benefits, you'd have to build out just like systems affected and related processes over here. And this will be a test benefit, right?
Yeah.
Files, I would leave to true. Benefits, again, requesters are very hard in understanding benefits and putting a name to them or a value. Expenses need to be built out. That's typically false, true, true. It could be true though. Expenses are not in this left navigation. They are in the time and expenses application over here. And it's an expense type, so I'll give you a couple typical ones. So software, right? And it needs a code here, so I'll just use a general ledger code if you have one. Software, I'll give you three pretty typical ones. Hardware, and then I'll do one more, like a vendor or contractor. And I'm sure you could probably think of 5 more easily. But then again, once you build these out, then they become drop-down items, and then you can put numerical values, dollar amounts next to those if you track expenses throughout the entire project request process. So you could turn that to true if you needed to. Time types, you can leave this one alone. That'll auto-populate for you anyway. You don't really need to worry about time types. Unless you wanted to gather time it takes for you to do the review process. Recently, and like within the last year, we had some customers ask us to add 2 things to this section. Time types for the review process and resources that spend. What we found is that some PMOs have like a dedicated business analyst or senior project manager that is doing all of the initial review of all the requests as they come in. And he or she may spend a couple hours a week going through their requests and kind of vetting them and meeting with people. And so they wanted to start tracking time that they spent on the project. So they load themselves on the project. The time types allow them to put that 2 hours a week or 3 hours a week, however long it takes on the request. And then they can record their time on it. Doesn't mean that resource is going to be on the project itself, but that they are spending time they want to track doing the review. So that if you want to do that, you'd want to set this to true for time types and this to true for resources in the for reviews column. The returns are more returns on investment, and I have yet to find a good person in any industry, public or private, that does a good job on ROI. And I'm just being brutally honest. Maybe you guys are good at it. If you are, I'd love to see your metrics, but it's so hard to calculate, okay, this is going to increase student retention or bring in new students or increase our sales or increase our marketing exposure. So I'd be very careful in doing anything in returns. Every once in a while, I'll have somebody who wants that turned on. It's usually false, false, false.
Yeah, the only thing I can see that possibly being, because most of our projects had to get board approval if it's over a certain amount. So maybe having a place, to have a place for justification.
Yeah, ROIs are hard to project.
Yeah.
But
well, this allows you to do some net present value and internal rates of return and that sort of metrics.
Oh, I see.
You could also, but you could also build out a custom attribute up here that says some of the financial information. How much is this expected to return? And they could just put in a numerical value there. So just an FYI.
Okay.
I am going to take a note that we are going to stop in the sections right before roll forecast, because I want to talk through the roll forecast, how that's leveraged in the tool. Because this roll forecast here leverages one of the foundational items that we talked about, which is your functional roles. So I want to talk through how that is used in the tool to start our next call on Thursday. So we'll pick up with roll forecasts, and then we'll finish going over a couple of these other items. And then we'll start out kind of the phase 2 stuff, talking about the scoring mechanism, and then how the scoring and other workflow steps can be designed. All right, guys, have a good day. We'll talk to you Thursday.